Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning into the podcast. I had a great conversation with Anthony D'Ambrosio about the making of The Triumph of the Heart. As some of you know, I was part of the crew for this film, so we had an interesting conversation about it. I also wanted to let you know I did have some technical difficulties with my camera. So there were a part when my video freezes, so you'll see that in the video. I apologize that this happened, and I hope you enjoyed this interview. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me on my podcast. I'm here with Anthony D'Ambrosio, director of Triumph of the Heart. I was part of the film crew on there, working on the camera department. And so I'm really happy to have Anthony on here to talk a little bit more in depth about his film and how he views storytelling. So welcome, Anthony. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me, man. I'm pumped. It's
Yeah.
good to get back together.
Yeah, what's been going on since coming back to the US from Poland? I know obviously there's been the Kickstarter going, hit the main goal of $80,000. I know we upped it to 200,000. So what's kind of been moving forward with that?
Yeah, I mean, running a crowdfunding campaign is always like an all-consuming thing because you never can plan for what is going to happen with it, and you just have to be kind of ready to respond to whatever is going on. And so we just kept on hitting our goals and being like, oh, now we have to do a whole nother like email campaign, a new social media campaign based on the new goal. And we just were never able to keep up with how fast we were hitting the goals. So we just figured I think it's time to go big and really start thinking about how we can use this film to make an impact. But outside of that, hiring editors and starting to organize the footage, it's all been a really big project. So, yeah.
So how involved are you with the editing process? Are you kind of like sitting in over Zoom calls or anything like that, watching playback together with them, or are they kind of sending you dailies or whatever as they're editing it? Like how is that process as a director and an editor going so far?
Our editor really wanted to do like the first assembly cut without having input, and then after that, I'm going to do a second cut myself, and then and with Andrew Holshoe together. He and I will be working on that together in a cabin in Broken Bow, Oklahoma, and then we're gonna see where we go from there from that second draft. Whether or not we're going to be super collaborative with another editor, or if we're just going to keep on doing our own edits ourselves.
Cool. And so now kind of like rewinding a little bit. I mean, you've been doing a lot of other like podcasts and shows and stuff, so I don't want to delve too deep into like the same questions you might have had on the other ones. And me being part of the crew, I already kind of had a general sense, obviously, what was going on there. But so I want to ask you kind of like, what is your approach when telling a story? So this one reason I was really excited to work on this film is because there was a different approach to a saint that I'm used to seeing, for example, on screen. Usually it's very kind of like data-based, historically driven. It's just basically like reading a biography. And though they're not to say that there's no historically accuracy in the film, there definitely is, but it's just approached in a different way where you prioritize the story, let's say, over the data. So I guess kind of like, what was your approach when writing this film and going into, you can say, like Kolbe's heart?
Yeah, I will say that I think the most important thing when I tell a story is that I have to be really attracted to it for some reason. And usually that attraction has something to do with something I have to work out in my own person. I think that the creative process is given to us, generally speaking, to make us work through something personally, and whatever is made, that becomes the fruit of the personal growth that has to be done inside. in the work of writing or creating or painting or filmmaking or whatever that medium is. So yeah, I think for me, the process of finding this way into Kolbe's story had a lot to do with um, my own doubt and my own struggle with the faith and my own grief, and also in some ways the things that I felt like I understood from Kolbe's story in terms of his character's growth, as or his the growth of his character as a human being. So all that to say, I think finding a story generally, like the general idea of a story is one thing, but then being like, okay, how do I want to tell this? Especially if there's a lot of other people who've taken a whack at it. What am I bringing personally that's unique and different that nobody else could possibly write, and that I have to write because of who I am and because of what the Holy Spirit is sort of, and the muses are trying to do in me.
And kind of to play off that a little deeper, why is storytelling to you important in the first place? Like, why do a film? Why write a book? Like, write a script? Why do any of the storytelling stuff? Why not just be content with like a biographical explanation of what happened at Auschwitz?
Yeah, that it's like, what is the nature of a story? What's the point of a story? I think that as moderns, we've like completely become fixated on historical accuracy as a measurement for whether or not a story is good, and I think it's honestly bullshit. Even I think it even obfuscates the point of history. I think we can be super nerdy about the accuracy of like the gunshots sounds in a movie, but the point of remembering, putting it back together, remember, to put back together the body. The point of remembering history is to learn something about human nature and about ourselves and about the nature of reality. And I think a story is almost like this, the human DNA of our morality, of our ethic, of our understanding of the world. And it's passed down the same way that DNA is passed down from generation to generation. And that DNA encapsulates how we should live, what's true about the world, what's dangerous about the world, how to survive in this world. And I think if we miss the point of the story, then we write or make or create things that are shiny but have no stickiness. And at the same time, it makes us, if all of your stories don't have that heart to it and don't have the DNA, it's like, I don't know, it's like we are going to be completely not ready for the world. We're basically forsaking generations and millennia of humans' experience that are important for us to learn from. It's like cutting our feet out from under us as human beings. So yeah, it's a problem out there, and it's a problem that I hope to solve, and I'm sure that's something you're focusing on too.
Yeah, that's why I kind of have these discussions. Early on, before the film was even filmed, we talked a lot about storytelling and what it means to us and different stuff like that. And I definitely feel that, at least from my experience within like the Catholic realm, and more specifically, you can say like the conservatives or the right or whatever, are really fixated on the like the whole data thing, right? And so, our battle cry is, facts don't care about your feelings or any of that, those kind of call outs. And I kind of hate it, because I do think experience is important. Like, I do think feelings matter to some extent. And there's a reason why things grab our attention and some things don't. And it goes beyond just data points, right? So, there's a common thing of like, within a group I'm involved, where we say water is wet, it's not H2O, because that's what you like experience, right? The H2O is not there until you need to look at it. And so I think it's interesting, kind of, because Kolbe's story in general, like the timing of it, where it is in history and how it's told, I think that you can say in like a metaphysical way itself is like a battle of that, of like telling his, there's this, that's kind of when it began, of this forensic approach, you can say, versus telling a story, kind of became this battle. And so that's also, in some way, you're almost one of the first ones that's really telling a story about Kolbe beyond just what like these historical points. And with that specifically, you decided to start his story in the cell, where traditionally his story kind of ends after he switches places with the other guy in Auschwitz. Sorry, his name completely came out of my
Francis
head.
Guy
Yeah. And so why did you decide to keep it in the cell and not go through focus on the other stuff before that and end it like everyone else does?
I think that it's more interesting. It's like the most, at least to me, it's the most interesting of all of the parts of his story. Like, you put a saint in a box with a bunch of people who don't agree with each other, who are in despair, who have no hope left, and who know they're going to die. And what do they do for however long they're alive? I mean, Kolbe was alive with a few of the other, like a few of them. I think it was 4 that were executed together. So he somehow inspired 4 people to survive all the way to 14 days with no food and water. How does that happen? What's going on there? And what are the conversations that they're having? What are they talking about? I think that's just an incredibly interesting thought experiment. And I think that's where it started for me, was just having a sense of being fascinated by what that would be like. And that was part of, I think, because it shows a challenge, like it's a challenge to a saint that's got real human stakes. And I think every story is really an encapsulation of, my life was this way because I had this flaw, and then I took these actions that ultimately put me to the point where I could overcome that flaw, and then the world changed because of that, right? Like, it's that is how you communicate a tale about a moral. And when we try to talk about our saints, I think especially the saints, we don't want them to have that flaw and that challenge and that struggle. We want to show them as triumphant. And in some ways, we do ourselves a huge disservice, because then we shroud the process of sainthood and make it seem distant and unachievable.
Yeah, we almost dehumanize them in a way. Like, it's just, they were, they reached perfection and they just stay there. They never had that journey to get there. Just, that's the single point, and then we just kind of like stay in that spot. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And so, one thing that's interesting for me being on set with you was I feel you're the first director that I saw approach directing in a completely different way, not just the way interacting with actors, but even the crew themselves. So I usually said that, when we were on set, you treated the whole experience almost more of like a stage play than a film recording to a certain extent. So, I'm used to kind of the way it operates is you have this storyboard and shot list, and you like get shot, cut, like readjust camera, shot, cut, and you, for the most part, had the whole scene kind of play out, and it was kind of like the camera has to, in a way, move with the motion of the scene kind of as it unfolds a little bit. Now, I know there's like different reasons and aspects for that, but I also feel like there was something special that was happening. So, what was the reason for that approach, and how much was it kind of like purposeful, and how much was it just because there was no, let's say, I don't know, more like logistical reasons?
Well, yeah, I think that part of something that I really struggle with in film is how mechanical it is. And that goes all the way from like the formulaic approach that we've seen develop in terms of screenwriting, where you have to have specific beats hit on specific pages. And it's like Hollywood has figured out the machine of filmmaking after generation or generation and generation. And so, especially now, which is much more recent, we cut a lot. We have to cut between, one shot, two shot. Anytime there's dialogue, somebody saying something, we're cutting, because of people's attention spans being much lower. But what that means on the back end of the actual process of production is that sometimes you don't even have the characters talking to each other. Like you have them, you have the other actors somewhere else, and you're making the guy pretend that there's the other actor there that he's talking to. And it puts this incredible burden. Sometimes actors are really that good that they don't really even need anything, and it's all up in their imagination. But I think that when you have characters responding to each other, the sense of the scene's reality becomes more and more palpable. And so the goal for me was to create an environment where every single person who was in the cast and crew was feeling the story and feeling the scene, and there wasn't as much interruption for the actors to remember that they're not actually in Auschwitz in a starvation cell dealing with each other. And what happens, I think, it's a trade-off for sure. Like, we're not going to have nearly as many cuts, and that might feel like it's stretching people's attention spans in the way that like older movies perhaps do. But the sense of this feels real is going to be much, much higher, because everybody on set was making it feel like it was real. And the actors, therefore, in their performances are going to demonstrate that. And I think, I don't know what you felt, but it certainly seemed like that was the case. It was working to create over time that almost like disassociation with like the outside world and this inner world that we were all kind of living in.
Yeah, I mean, there was a little bit of a challenge, right? Because most of us, I mean, I know specifically I can speak on behalf of like me and Benji, because we kind of worked really closely together for the most part with lighting and setting things up, there was just a challenge of basically knowing that there's no reset point. And so it's like, where do we place these things so they're not in the shot? Like something as simple as that, or even just like, just like building the scene in a non-traditional way where it doesn't interfere with what's happening, right?
Right. It's super challenging.
Where's the stage, right? Because even in a stage play, you have the stage and that's where everything happens, right? But even with this, it was kind of like, how is this going to unfold, and where are the actors going to decide that their stage is to play this out to some extent? Now, obviously, there is a little bit of this. An actor also has to pay attention themselves of like, okay, I shouldn't act out much here because obviously they have most of their stuff there. So like I have to make do with what I have at the same time. But there is still that kind of like aspect of the building of the scene was just different in terms of lighting and placing cameras and stuff like that. And, it was a challenge that sometimes caused frustration, but at the same time, it was definitely also very rewarding at the same time of seeing that it is possible if you have, if you really think about, okay, how are we going to do this? And in some sense, you also tap in, you can say, I guess, to some of the masters of the old films, right? Because I feel like maybe that's how they operated more so than what you explained with like, oh, this is the science of Hollywood, right? Like this is the machine of the storytelling machine. And, I appreciate it, but it definitely had some challenges like going into it and not knowing that at some point that's happening. Now, obviously some of that is also just due to the realistic and logistical things we had going on too, of, the budget that was there, and just, we had to also make do with what we did. But I think it all worked. So, and it's not just that it worked. I mean, it turned, there are people watching the monitor crying. So
Right.
even during like the not finished cut that was happening.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because there's also some of it that is like, there's my style as a director. Then there is the lack of preparation because of budget, and then there is the noviceness, I guess, of not knowing exactly how to approach doing it the most efficient way. Like, and I think that it would have been frustrating regardless, but it certainly was teaching me a lot about how to think through the process of planning out these scenes. And there's such a Rubik's cube that's happening, right? Where it's like, okay, we've got we've got to do 3 makeup changes today, and we've got to do 2 lighting changes today. What's the like most efficient way of getting all of that stuff done without having to add in all of these transitions, and all of that is, I don't know, maybe every film is going to be that complicated, but holy shit, man, that was like, at least at the timeline that we were going, if we're trying to shoot 10 pages to 11 pages a day, like it's just crazy trying to get that to be efficient. But it felt like a roller coaster, and I think all of us were just like, we would come back furious some nights, but a lot of times the sense of like accomplishment on, hey, we just shot 12 pages today. Like, I can't believe we did that. It's like, you feel like a hero,
Yeah, and it's not even that it was like you shot 12 pages, but like maybe like exterior Auschwitz is super involved, right? Like there's dogs and other soldiers. Like there's a whole scene. It's not like you had 2 characters in a diner, and it was like,
right.
Sometimes it was like 12 pages of that, and you had like 100 people on set and doing that. Yeah. What was and then kind of, I guess this kind of plays along with my earlier question that we got into discussion too, is also why did you feel it was also necessary to draw and have the crew be involved with the story itself as much as the actors, right? So every morning you led these meditations to think about it, but you also made sure that specifically the ones I can think of is like the exterior Auschwitz stuff. You wanted to make sure that people were kind of meditating on the moment as we were filming these scenes. Like you didn't want it to be like, okay, the actors are living this and all the crew, you're kind of dismissed. You can take out your cell phones and take pictures. So why did you approach it that way? So why did you have like the crew basically be like mini cast members to some extent?
Because vulnerability, I think that what is normal on sets is, I think, it's really dishonoring to stories, because you have these actors who are being asked to be incredibly vulnerable, and you're not really recognizing that that's what's happening, right? It's like, this is their job, right? They just, go into character, they feel the feelings, they cry, they sing, they dance, they kiss, whatever. And you don't think about it like, this is a human being. And if you understand an actor, like what they're trying to do is not to pretend. They're trying to bring forth out from within themselves genuine emotion, things like they are in the story so deeply that they are feeling as if they are, this is what's happening right now. And in order to preserve that flow state for actors, if somebody else outside, the crew member is just like taking selfies and is goofing off like right next to this other person who's trying to pretend like they're in Auschwitz, it creates this this rift between them, and it all of a sudden just wakes the person up out of the momentum that they've been building to enter into the story. And so I think, as somebody who's an actor myself, I really understand what I'm asking the actors to show me in these really vulnerable scenes where they're supposed to bring forth like terror and unbelievable anxiety and pain. That's real. Like they're accessing real memories, they're accessing real experiences inside of themselves. They're constructing an imaginary sort of world in which that has become so authentic to them that their nervous system is responding to it, right? So yeah, I think that's the point, is if all of the crew members are in the same mental space and are being as vulnerable as the cast are, then the cast can keep going. They can go deeper than they could have, and it comes out in their performances.
Do you think there's also any benefit? So, the way you explained it was mostly for the benefit of the cast or the actors. Do you think that anything also plays in with a crew member, maybe
Oh, for
they
sure.
see something, like specifically, I guess, from the perspective of the DP or the camera guys or whatever? Like, do you think they're able to catch certain moments more purposefully that they maybe wouldn't have gotten if you didn't create that environment?
Yeah, for sure. I think I listened to Sidney Lumet a lot. He had a book that was kind of influential to me on how he thought about filmmaking, and he kept on saying that the most important thing was to make sure you're all making the same movie, and that's in a way like the hardest thing for a director to accomplish, is to get all of these different creatives all to be on the same wavelength about what we're trying to do here. And so I think if a crew member is really connected to their own heart, and their own heart is connected to the story and the scene that we're trying to create, they're going to be much more likely to make decisions that are in line with what everybody else is doing. And so then you have a cohesive whole in the final product that feels like everybody was making the same movie. Yeah. And so this is my first time doing it, so I can't say, well, this is like this is definitely my experience after doing short films and things like that. But it also feels to me like, hey, I cut my teeth leading retreats and stuff. And if all of the core team members or the people who were leading it were like out doing something completely different than like what they were trying to invite the kids into, it just wouldn't work. And so, yeah, it just seemed to me to be like the most natural way to evolve from my experience doing youth ministry and doing retreats and things like that into the creation of a spiritual set, which in a lot of ways operates in similar ways.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that's a beautiful take on that. I mean, sometimes when people ask me about being on the film and stuff, I say this was more like a pilgrimage than it was being on a film set. Like there was something deeper that was going on, everything considered, because of that approach you had, I think really played into that of being deeply involved in the story. It didn't make me feel necessarily like I wasn't necessarily thinking about oh, these are the shots in this, these are the shots we have to do today or anything like that. I was more thinking so of the story and stuff that we were telling, like really meditating upon the cellmates in the cell and all of that, more so than I once again more of like just the logistical stuff that was happening of like, oh, when is lunch again? It wasn't part of the flow of this set. And so I know we're running a little out of time. I don't want to take too much of your time. So one more question I just want to ask is, what is something, you kind of had this film idea and you kind of just went for it. I know you had some challenges. You had a lot of challenges stuff making it, but to some extent, I know there's like a whole other process in post, but you got really far already. And so what are one of the biggest lessons, I guess, you learned as a filmmaker making this movie? And would you do it again?
Hell yeah, man. Hell yeah. I'd do it again every year. No, I think that the biggest lesson really is just that you have to make the thing before you get to know whether it's going to work. Like you just don't know what, like I had a sense in my gut that this is like a good story and that people would get behind it, but there's no way that I really could have seen when I was sitting down to write, like where it would go, you know? And I think that all creatives really struggle with that, the sense of like being too afraid of the future to start something small and to do the small things to build towards that big thing. But yeah, every time I listen to somebody who's super successful in the creative industry, there's this common thread of you just do something with what you have. And then you get a little more and you do something with what you have. And it's just this slow, almost exponential thing that takes a long time, you know, like going from 1 to 2 and then 2 to 4. And then it all looks really slow at first. But then when you get up to there's this point that happens when all of a sudden the momentum has just gone crazy and you have a hockey stick. And that's sort of what it was like for me. I think if I could go back and tell myself anything when I was more of getting started as a creative, it's just like, don't be afraid to just start. Just start, man. Just start and just keep going. Small little bits here and there. Doesn't matter if it's good. Just keep going. And that kind of commitment to something, I think, is really the main key to having good things happen to you. And in a lot of ways, it seems to me like the universe, and as a Catholic, I would say the Holy Spirit, God, like there's a conspiring to help the creative. That feels like that happens when somebody has actually put pen to paper and started to move forward in an idea. Not just like in their heads, but like, I'm doing this thing, I'm making it. Like it's stuff just magically begins to happen. It's hard to describe how and why and where it comes from, but that's been my experience.
Yeah, when I've wrote my poetry book, it was like that. It was just like, I wasn't really thinking about it. It was like a flow state. I said that there was a muse that just kind of like almost like had the words like flow from my head to my hand, and it just went on the paper. Mm-hmm. But yeah, thank you for coming on and kind of discussing, talking about some updates and how you worked about making this film happen. Where, if people wanted to, where could they go to continue to support the film?
Yeah, we would love support. If you want to go to triumphoftheheart.com, that's the name of the movie, or you can go to 16670.life. That's Kolbe's prisoner number, 16670.life.
Perfect. Well, I'll also have this in the description below on YouTube for anyone that watches it on there. But once again, thank you for coming by and speaking to me and kind of like slightly catching up here.
Yeah, it was really fun, man. Thanks for inviting me on.
Hey everyone, thank you again for watching this video. Make sure you like and subscribe below. If you would like to support, just a reminder that I'm also a video production person. I can do any branding work, any other video assignments that you may need. Check out my website at holy7.tv to check out my work. And I hope we can work together on a project. But until the next podcast, see you then.